There's literally not enough rare earth minerals in the world and not enough manufacturing fabrications labs to be able to actually produce the memory required today. And so this memory wall is literally us hitting a wall as an industry of not being able to satisfy the overwhelming demand for tokens and needing much more clever approach.
Hello and welcome to the Deep Geeks podcast. I am here today with Val Bercovici, who is the Chief AI Officer of WEKA. And I can't wait to dive into today's conversation because we had such a great prep. We almost couldn't stop talking about AI. So, Val, welcome to the show.
Great to be on again, Serena.
Well, I just came back from a conference where every company there was showing off their dashboard of token usage by team, by function, and for a leaderboard even. Everyone was so proud. And there I was thinking, gosh, when we get the bill in a quarter, you're probably not going to be as happy about it. And then as I got back, I also heard that Uber's COO just announced that they weren't getting the ROI they were hoping from AI, and it's getting so expensive that token usage isn't translating into features for customers. Val, are you surprised by any of this?
Not at all. I mean, I guess I'm surprised how long it took, to be honest. But my memory kind of goes back to the early cloud days when a couple of
Mhm.
developers, there wasn't a lot of IT people back then, but a lot of developers and a couple of the executives close to developers were super excited about what they could do. The agility of developing and deploying applications in the cloud was super exciting. And then, of course, the bills came in a few months later, and the sticker shock happened, and this whole category of FinOps, right? Just
Yeah.
financially engineering applications to not break the bank from a cloud bill perspective became a real formal discipline not long after the rise of cloud. We're seeing the same thing play out, probably faster now, but I kind of was expecting people to have the sticker shock, and I was surprised by the whole token maxing trend, right? That we saw in the spring, where everyone is literally just almost inflating token numbers just to game leaderboards, and obviously everybody wants to be at the top of a leaderboard, but we knew that couldn't last.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of companies are surprised in so many ways that they were perhaps not giving the right incentives to users. And then also, on the other hand, the cost of AI is surprising in a very unpleasant way, too. So I'd love to just talk a little bit more about the economics of AI and tokenomics. Is that a word, Val?
Absolutely. It
Okay.
actually comes, some people in the crypto world have their definition of it, but I think like
Oh,
many things, the AI industry has kind of co-opted it and taken it over to mean its own thing.
yeah, and I think people are stuck in this old narrative that AI is going to get cheaper and we will use more of it. Cost goes down, demand goes up, Econ 101, and then cost eventually somehow normalizes. I don't think that's actually happening. And I'm curious if you can share with us just what's driving that cost and what's underneath.
Yeah, it's easy to look at just one side of a coin, just one narrative here, because you could factually claim and be correct that the unit cost of inference is plunging, right? The actual per token cost, and I think DeepSeek recently made some pretty big headlines, not just with
Mhm.
the V4 model announcement, V4 Pro and Flash, but their shockingly low pricing,
Right?
particularly for cash read tokens. So you could argue, hey, look at the price of inference, it's plunging. What is happening on the other side of the same coin, though, is Jevons paradox. Is every time a valuable commodity decreases in price, we're seeing the consumption dwarf that reduction in price. And the math is like for every 100x reduction, we're seeing like a 10,000x increase in consumption. So that net difference, that the final cost of inference is almost 100x more than we projected it right now, which is why we're seeing the bills that people are beginning to annualize come in, the
Mm,
5, 10, $15,000 a day bills for people
yes.
that token maxed. Doing the math at $5 million annualized cost per user just doesn't math.
Wow. Right. Wait, so 15,000, not even per month. You're talking per day just on AI.
The biggest token maxing boasters, if you will, were at that figure because hey, it was a great figure.
Wow, this is going to be shocking. I think I'm thinking about the CFOs I've talked to who are, of course, having to think about budget on a much longer term basis. And now on a quarterly basis, they might even be surprised because the presentations have been saying the unit cost is falling, but no one was preparing for the forecast of that 100x or even 1,000x usage, and that bill is going to surprise us in a year that no one is prepared for. I think the other part of this conversation that is a little uncomfortable is a lot of companies are making decisions about their talent, their workforce, using this incorrect assumption that AI is getting cheaper
Yeah.
and AI is cheaper than humans. And we are not really seeing that, are we?
No, in fact, one of the most popular new commands of all the agents, whether it's Claude Code or OpenClaw or Hermes, is the slash goal command. And that's where
Oh,
hopefully you specify something really well in terms of an ambitious project or app that you want. And it will go off the agent swarm. The agent will spawn sub
yep.
agents. And it'll go off for not just, seconds or minutes the way we're used to chats, but hours and even days, and iterate and test and improve, but ultimately deliver a highly functional app with great built-in security, with enterprise authentication and auditing, everything you'd expect. But that token cost, for that project will be tens of thousands of dollars. And so what people are realizing is, yeah, you've got to figure out, you know, this token consumption. It's not as efficient as humans in many cases, and it's costing more than humans when applied incorrectly.
Right. And that's a really good reminder because I think we were definitely not prepared for that. And our brains like to simplify things because, well, ambiguity is tough on our brain. So I feel like there's a narrative about AI cost that is a little bit too simple. Like there's one AI and then it costs the same price. But when we were preparing for this conversation, you mentioned there are actually different tiers that, yes, as someone who uses AI, I might be aware of it. But ultimately, at the leadership level, I'm not sure everyone's paying attention to that. So could you walk us through the different tiers of AI costs that we talked about?
Yeah, and in fact, that phenomenon you described actually has a name over the last few weeks, which is called AI psychosis. And
Oh my
that's like,
gosh.
the further you are, yeah, away from actually hands-on with these tools, the simpler the mental model you have. And I think one of the traps that people, especially leaders, can fall into if they're not hands-on is applying chat mentality to
Hmm.
what agents actually are and how they work. They're fundamentally different in almost every way. We think of chats as, we have a chat with a model. And if we don't like it, we kind of start a new chat with a better model. Or if we think the price is too high, we start another chat with a lower quality model. Agents, don't work that way. They don't just work with
Okay.
one model, and they don't just have a prompt and response.
Right.
They basically have multiple turns, dozens, hundreds of prompts and response turns. They often include lots of context and not just one PDF, but entire libraries or corpus of material, entire
Right.
code bases and so forth, entire, Wikipedia sized knowledge bases. That is a very, very different experience, which means that we need to have segmentation. It's almost like an old
Right.
MBA thing. As any market matures, it segments. So at the
Yep.
very least, we're seeing these three common segments emerge. And Anthropic has done a really good job of like branding these segments. You've got
Hmm.
Opus as a high-end premium model with premium token pricing. You've got Sonnet as sort of the budget model for just, higher volume of tokens, but at a slightly lower quality. And then Haiku, which is like the budget bargain bin where you have
Yes.
really, really high volume bulk tokens, but you don't expect deep thinking there. You just expect execution of very explicit tasks. And the combination of all three are what developers are using right now for latency reasons. If you don't have,
Mhm.
or if you have an unlimited budget, but then obviously with real budget, requirements in hand for budget reasons, financial budget reasons,
Right.
We're mixing and matching these models because right tool for the right job applies in AI as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's a great reminder for people, right tool for the right job. And right tool means different tiers. I'm curious if you have even seen, let's not call it incorrect usage, but maybe using the wrong tier. Like the job doesn't really need an agent, but somehow, maybe a regular chat would do or a project, but instead an agent was created. Have you
Yeah.
seen anything in real life?
Yeah, like one of the I think really positive impacts of OpenClaw coming on the scene in December and going viral is it made the technology much more accessible, not just
Mhm.
to developers that love hacking on it, but to a lot of tinkerers and hobbyists and home labs
Right.
that go to work and then do knowledge work, right, 9 to 5. And everyone quickly realized, they did their own math very, very quickly, realized they were blowing through their personal token budgets at home and just implemented policies, just literally told the agents in plain English, reduce my costs. And the agents quickly figured out, well, how do we do that? We use more than one model. We use, some models obviously for simpler work. And there's this part of these agent frameworks, harnesses, which just does a regular scheduled task in the morning, like check the weather or
Yeah.
check a stock price. Developers know that as a cron job, right? Just a regularly recurring task. And the open claw hackers quickly realized I don't need a model to run this
Mm.
cron job, right? I can just run a cron job. Like I can just
Right.
use the tool directly instead of actually having an agent call a tool and add an artificial layer of latency, but especially cost. And
Hmm.
that's what I love is these agents themselves going out and researching common best practices, instantly developed internal policy agents within themselves to say, okay, here's the complexity of this particular task. I will use a premium model, but here's a lower
Mm.
complexity. I will use a budget model. Here's just simple execution. I'll use a bargain basement bulk model. And that's the built-in hierarchy that agents learned
Right.
autonomously and are deploying independently.
Wow. I love that. That's so smart. So now there was another recent headline about Microsoft where they moved away from Cloud Code because of cost, and they're asking people to go back to GitHub Copilot, which I've used and it's a great tool. But the cost was kind of the driver for that decision. It sounded like. Do you think they are making a tier decision, or is this more just overall cost cutting? What are your thoughts on that?
So that's a really important headline. I noticed that the other day myself. I'm going to speculate that there's at least two aspects to it. We can't ignore the fact that, when one company has a product and their internal developers, users are using the competitor's product, then that doesn't look good, right? So you do need to be dog fooding for all sorts of reasons your own product. So I'm sure that contributed to it. But no, I think it's representative of what I'm seeing at other startups, other software companies, and some dev heavy enterprises, which is the fact that the token costs are really coming home to roost right now. They're real. So we like to say people are moving from token maxing to signal maxing more right
Mm.
now, trying to extract more ROI, more signal from the noise of all the tokens. And in doing so, it's clear now that we have not just Anthropic or OpenAI, but the open weights models. Whether they're the resurgent sort of U.S. open source models, but especially the Chinese models that are amazing.
Right.
And we're seeing a natural hierarchy of, okay, maybe there's only a few frontier models that are the premium ones, but
Mm.
now instead of paying, OpenAI or Anthropic for their middle tier, their medium tier, I will go to DeepSeek, I will go to Kimi, I will go to
Right.
GLM, I will go to Minimax, and I will get very much the equivalent sort of Sonnet mid-tier functionality, but I'll get it at, 10% of the price. And that
Yeah.
enables my agents to be so much more powerful and think and validate more.
Right. Absolutely. And I remember even being impressed by DeepSeek 2 versions ago,
Yeah.
and it's just incredible now.
They continue to deliver, right? They kind of went dark for, I think the figure
Right.
was 484 days. That's a
Who's counting?
dangerous. I know it's crazy, and it's a dangerous thing to do, right? Because their competitors out of China were just shipping almost every week
Right.
newer and newer models leapfrogging each other. It was kind of breathtaking to observe, And then they came out like almost, over a year later and just wham, this
Right.
other fundamentally, powerful, game-changing release. And cool thing about DeepSeek, not to be too much of a fanboy, but people in the industry love them because they publish so much. It's not just
Yes.
about shipping a model. It's about these amazing white papers they publish.
Right.
And they went ahead and said, it's no longer that important to compete at the top of the benchmark leaderboards because the models are
Mhm.
converging in some sense. They're
Hmm.
certainly all converging on benchmarks because that's what benchmarks do, is they kind of force you to train for the benchmark. But the cost, right? Back to the cost again, and segmenting, the tiers. DeepSeek really innovated on the cost, and they were able to introduce scalable, workable compression
Right.
that really compressed this memory consumption from KV cache by 90%, where most of their competitors really couldn't compress and retain quality, having best of both worlds. So that's the magic of DeepSeek, is that's why their prices can be so low, because they use less memory and they haven't sacrificed the quality.
Yeah, I'm a fan as well. But let me just pause for a little bit and give our audience a quick summary on what we just talked about. For anyone who's listening, before you sign or renew an AI contract, ask which tier your workflows actually require in your organization. Because if you're paying the premium prices for basic work, that's very expensive and you have a big procurement problem on your hand.
I think, yeah, it's even first principles now. Most procurement teams are used to negotiating with SaaS vendors. And so
Yes.
it's very much like, let's budget on a per seat basis. And what we're quickly realizing, and we're in the middle of this right now, so I think it's messy for the industry, it's confusing for customers, is there's no such thing as per seat production AI pricing. There might be some floor,
Hmm.
some per seat entry, but everyone is moving towards consumption-based pricing. So
Right.
thinking of software as a utility is very new to procurement teams, because
Yes.
it's today between hard and impossible to budget for. And of course, the prediction tools, the measurement metrics, the measurement tools will improve, and we'll be able to project consumption-based costs better over time. But we're
Right.
really not there yet as an industry. So to your point, you really have to do a lot of due diligence now in
Yeah.
signing up to these AI contracts, because you are writing a blank check in some sense.
Yes. That will keep any CFO up at night, a blank check on AI. And let's talk a little bit about token maxing. I know we started the conversation around dashboards that I saw about usage, and I also see from the people side where organizations are now incentivizing AI usage. It's almost like use AI, just use it more, show us the numbers. And right now, I get it, right? Adoption is hard, and especially for large organizations, it might take time to get to ROI, and the board is pushing hard on show us the numbers, show us AI is making a difference. Um, but what is, I guess, tell us what's wrong with token maxing and what would you recommend instead?
Yeah, I like to think of these kinds of trends in terms of bell curves. So
Mm,
at the front of the bell curve are people that have gone through, all of the early adoption pains and lessons, and now are on the other end of it and are figured out how to sort of get true ROI to signal max. But a lot of the industry, sort of the meat of the bell curve today, across the global 2000 worldwide, is still really in the how do I apply AI at work phase, and
mhm.
where's the business value of
Right.
AI. I am observing, I guess maybe it's anecdotal because I'm not a professional analyst, but there's enough day-to-day evidence I have in talking to customers and partners all day long, that there's no question about the individual productivity benefits of AI. It's
Mhm.
it's hard to find any internal slide deck or internal spreadsheet or internal dashboard that isn't AI generated today. It's the group
Right.
productivity that people are still struggling with.
Mm,
But, we're still seeing a lot of people, a lot of executives, if they're not headline chasing, cloud chasing, or certainly their earnings reports a couple of quarters ago, was very important to say that my company was not behind this trend, that my company was AI savvy, and investors wanted to hear that you were leveraging the productivity benefits. So we're still in that, in-between zone right now of leadership encouraging, staff to use AI aggressively,
mhm.
incentivizing in some cases where we saw the token maxing trend emerge, like Some people, literally got bonuses if they were at the top of these leaderboards. There's
Right.
certainly a lot of internal recognition,
Yeah.
promotions, and clout. And that drove, again, to your point, that was unaligned behavior, right? Because the incentives were really wrong there.
Yeah.
It's not just about, how much gas can you burn? It's about, what kind of mileage are you getting, right? And
Ooh,
so that's
yes.
where we are today. Is I think people are realizing now that yes, we need to go beyond just burning a lot of gas. We need to look at our mileage.
Yes, I like that. And I think this is why I love analogies, as you know, and incentives really matter. So in signal maxing instead, what should a leadership team think about and incentivize differently? What is a signal? Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to define it. Engineers have had this term for a while called good put, which is
Mhm.
literally, it's output that's useful as opposed to just output that keeps the system busy.
Mm,
We even in the AI industry for training, we used to measure, how busy can you keep the GPUs because the
yep.
GPUs are so expensive that if they're idle, it's a huge waste of money. So people just figured out how to just run a lot of inefficient training scenarios, right?
Right.
So what did that do? On the one hand, it definitely kept your GPUs busy and you felt like you were getting your money's worth. On the other hand, you weren't really getting model checkpoints, model versions shipping any faster. So the efficient model training used to be one important AI metric of how quickly can you checkpoint, how short are these epoch times that you have. That was a very, very important metric. Today, I think it's really all about tokens, for example. So when you're signal maxing, you're actually getting a lot of verified, useful output, either an accurate spreadsheet, a relatively bug-free or functional application,
Right.
a dashboard that works and is useful and has a good user experience, and you're not consuming a billion tokens for that, which has
Right.
happened, but you're consuming maybe a million, maybe only 100 million tokens instead of the billion. So it definitely is, to your point earlier on, about not just using the most expensive model for everything. It's about understanding that some models are better at planning, others are better at delegating, others are better at doing the work that's delegated, others are better at just verifying that the work is accurate because there's clear yes no criteria, reward functions, if you will, as to what's a successful outcome or not. And it's
Yeah.
the engineering of these together that results in great signal to noise ratios and good signal maxing and less token maxing over time.
Yeah, I like that. Signal per token instead.
Exactly.
It's a much better measure. And and I think this is going to be so important for everyone who is listening, thinking about setting goals for even their next years, for their team. And how do we continue to reinforce AI is important, is life changing, and has lots of potential without incentivizing the wrong behaviors. Yes, AI adoption, and I really like the, I'll call them business metrics that you mentioned too, right? Is it actually not just output that is useful, but impacting the eventual customers? You created a dashboard, great. How's the user experience? Do people actually use it? Is it leading to better decisions? And that's the KPI that we have always measured in successful businesses, and not so much on the number of hours that you worked, or in this case, how many tokens you have burned.
Exactly. It's the old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. So
That's right. That's right. Okay. I'm going to shift towards the memory, and really give our listeners a flavor, a bit of what's really driving the cost, because a lot of people I talk to, they they have heard of GPUs, but they have never, and they're not going to touch one, right? And the cost may be really confusing because it seems like in SaaS days it is per seat, and actually it should go down. Why is it going up? So I want to set this up as a just a chance for us to speak to the VP of AI or a CFO, or someone who's negotiating an AI contract. How should they think about the bill, and where does memory play a role?
this is where the stock market's actually helping educate a lot of leaders because if you just
Ooh,
take a look at the stock prices of the memory suppliers and the storage suppliers, the flash storage suppliers, non-volatile memory, it just, they're like meme stocks. They're just astronomically high right now, only over the last 3 to 6 months. And that's a direct reflection of the fact that as the AI industry is maturing and really dramatically shifting from a focus on just training to now monetizing these models that we spend so many billions training,
Right.
inference, those are just fundamentally different workload profiles. You can pretty much build different data centers for training and inference. And we're actually seeing a lot of vendors come to market. NVIDIA themselves made this high profile acqui-hire of a company called Grok with a Q back in December of last year. And that was an inference only, basically accelerator. It's not even a GPU anymore. It's an LPU, a language or linear processing unit. The Cerebras IPO recently, right? The other week was so popular and oversubscribed because they're focused on inference. They're not really focused on training. So people are realizing now that inference is dominating the infrastructure discussion. And inference, when you speak to the actual technologists, the researchers, the inference operators, inference is more memory centric. The math, the simple math, round number math is for every 100,000 tokens, which is a very, very typical sort of prompt nowadays for an agent, that 100,000 of tokens used to translate to, which is about, a megabyte of actual data, used to translate to about 30 to 50 gigabytes, not megabytes anymore, of memory, actual expensive, high bandwidth memory. Some of the, most precious real estate in the world, as we like to joke from a silicon square millimeter perspective. And that's just not tenable. And that's one of the innovations that DeepSeek was able to bring to market, and many others have also sort of followed, is let's reduce that giant memory amplification from 1 megabyte to, instead of 30 to 50 gigabytes, only 3 to 5 gigabytes. But as we spoke earlier on with Jevons paradox, as we reduce the size of that memory per unit, the amount of units now explodes 100x. Well, 10,000x, but 100 net x. And what that means is we're just memory bounding, and there's not enough memory. And when you take a look at the actual supply chain, the way analysts I speak with have taken a look at it, there's literally not enough rare earth minerals in the world and not enough manufacturing fabrications labs to be able to actually produce the memory required today. And so this memory wall is literally us hitting a wall as an industry of not being able to satisfy the overwhelming demand for tokens and needing much more clever approach. DeepSeek is one of them. They optimize the KV cache size in one dimension. One of the things I've been working on at WEKA, the personal reason why I joined, is the ability for WEKA to actually bring abundance to this environment, because when you can actually take the cost basis of storage, but make storage behave honestly like memory, not like storage, so much faster, much lower latency, you're now adding abundance to this very scarce infrastructure reality. And that combination of better per unit efficiency on the DeepSeek side and abundant memory infrastructure from the WEKA side is what the industry needs right now to scale the memory wall.
This is probably the best use of the word abundance I have heard in a really long time, along with scarcity.
Exactly.
I like that. I like that. I think I'm gonna have to turn that into a new hashtag at some point. And I think what you described there is so important. And I want to give our listeners a picture, if you will, that they can take home. So and what I'm hearing is that GPU, in the analogy, maybe it's like a stove in the kitchen, right? And so you can have a really good stove, top of the line, but then the memory is more like the prep chef or the prep table next to it. So you can have the best stove that is cooking amazing food really quickly, but if your prep chef or your prep station cannot keep up, you can still not produce as many fabulous dishes as you would like, right? How does that analogy land with you?
If you're a fan of that TV show, The Bear, then it lands perfectly, right? Because whether you watch, kitchen reality shows or whether you watch movies or TV series about this, you see it, it's as plain as day in that there's real bottlenecks in the kitchen, and there's obviously very high priced equipment, like you said, in the kitchen. But if you don't have an efficient system, then you're just leaving those expensive resources like that wonderful $20,000 stove
Yeah.
sitting idle 99% of the time. And not only is that a waste, you have very hangry, unhappy customers, right?
Yes.
At the end of it also.
Yes, and we don't want any hangry customers for sure.
Exactly. No hangry
Um,
token users.
yes, and I think that's another metric that companies might need to think about as well is that utilization. If your GPU cluster is running only 30% utilization, you are paying the bill. You're still paying for the full bill, right, Val?
Oh yeah, no, the bill
What does
always
count?
comes home. So yeah.
If I were to summarize this around the memory constraint that a lot of companies and leaders are not thinking about, the costs are not falling because, they're not falling in a way that the presentations showed you or promised. And it is now, kind of like maybe your cell phone bill. Remember, like when
Exactly.
text used to
Exactly.
cost
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
per, it was like a per text cost. And now you just pay the full bill and you can even send images, you can send videos to your friends and the cost of each tax is almost zero. But guess what? I don't know about you, my bill didn't go down. It actually went up, and
Yeah.
I'm using it so much more now. So that's the same for AI and depending on which analogy you like, the phone bill or the kitchen, if you like to eat. It's something to keep in mind, especially for long-term budget planning purposes and then also maybe not make your workforce and talent decisions so quickly based on what you think the cost is going to be because you could be in for a very unpleasant surprise.
The bill, I think, in addition to the kitchen's a perfect analogy because I still, maybe not all of us remember complex mobile phone bills in the early mobile phone days,
Right.
but there were pages and pages. These envelopes were
Yeah.
thick every month because everything was itemized, line items, and then the bottom line was like always too high. And we're from a procurement perspective, we're very much in that exact same era for AI today. Is we're getting very, very complex bills, very
Hmm.
utility
True.
oriented, high
Yeah.
consumption bills. Bottom line isn't what we like or expect. And we have to go through this maturity of AI FinOps to be able to understand, measure, and then engineer these bills down. And we're definitely not there yet. And there needs to be a focus. The other thing I'd emphasize is that a lot of technology leaders kind of have a legacy cloud. I never thought I'd say those
Hmm.
two words in the same sentence, but like a legacy cloud mentality to AI clouds, where you can provision a big CPU server and big CPU instance, and then optionally add more memory to it and optionally add storage and so forth. That is not
Right.
how AI is built and not how it works. The performance requirements are so high, the latency tolerances are so low
Right.
that AI has to, for example, package GPUs and GPU memory, the high bandwidth memory, in the same package. You
Right.
can only provision it together, which means that, again, if you're training and inferring, you almost don't want the same GPU, right? You want one kind of GPU for training because it comes with certain memory, but you want much more memory and less GPU for inference. And you can't even buy and deploy systems yet that way. And that's what's
Hmm.
coming. That's where the abundance from WEKA is coming from, is we're really the first to disaggregate the compute from the memory for inference, for example, which is more of a mental model match for technical leaders in the cloud era. And that's
Hmm.
happening finally. I think 2026 will see it, next year even more so. We'll finally get back to that familiar concept, even for AI data centers.
Yes, and I think there are lots of companies who are maybe starting to become aware that will be ready, and then others that will be very unpleasantly surprised. I remember, Val, you've written about this era of what you call artificially low AI prices right now,
Yeah.
where inference providers essentially subsidizing the cost to capture market share, to drive adoption. What happens when that subsidies end? What does AI pricing actually look like in 12 to 18 months?
Fans of analogies, right, as we are, I think this is where we apply the Uber analogy, right? Where buying market share and getting consumers effectively addicted to a certain way of working, a certain way of just operating with technology was the VC
Right.
subsidized era, the immediate post ChatGPT era of
Yep.
AI. But we're seeing very much right now, it's not even in pricing, it was really felt in token rate limits. Again, the fact that there's
Hmm.
just not enough raw materials to satisfy the token demand today. So this notion of surge token pricing definitely became a thing late last year and this
Yeah.
year, where we're seeing huge prices, more market reality prices for final token bills, final token consumption, not just that low unit cost. And we're seeing providers, for example, famously like Anthropic, just having to artificially impose low, strict rate limits on their best customers, their highest paying users, because there's just not enough token supply to allocate to the overwhelming demand. So rate limits, even before actual huge bills, were the first wall, the first pain points that people were hitting. And I think it's being reflected now in just even higher pricing to try
Right.
and not hit rate limits, because you're not even going to consider using, for example, Opus 4.7 fast mode, which has some astronomical multi-$100 per million token output price point that we've never seen before. I think we need to get used to, with Mythos now and new
Yeah.
higher quality tiers of models appearing on the market, they will create new ceilings, shattering glass ceilings of pricing tiers. And we will start to see, just like when Uber had to go public and, had to become a kind of a real company and investors demanded, the ROI term again, actual returns on their investments. We had to see more real market pricing being reflected, which we're all paying as rideshare consumers right now
Yep.
because we like the convenience. Same thing is going to happen. And we have to figure out, can we afford AI? Can
Right.
we afford one model of AI, or do we really have to financially engineer multiple models to the best solution?
Wow. So are you saying that if we follow this trend and as the subsidies and this whole AI is cheaper than people thesis is not going to survive?
Definitely not in the simplest narrative, right? Of like one model being applied for real work, which means in an agent swarm with,
Right.
multiple concurrent agents, long context, multiple turns. Doing that all with one model has already proven to just be broken, right? It's unsustainable, unaffordable. Even some of the best benchmarks in the world right now, like the ARC AGI benchmark and so forth,
Yeah.
are starting to reflect the fact that you have to factor in the actual number of tokens, and
Hmm.
what's the cost per solution for the tokens consumed, not just the individual token costs. Artificial intelligence is measuring that now and so forth. So the industry is maturing and realizing that efficiency matters, right? You can have revenue, but if you don't have profit, then what's the point, right? If your costs are higher than your revenues, then it's pointless. So the industry is maturing, it's segmenting. We're seeing, interestingly enough, as I mentioned with OpenClaw, not just good engineering from a human architecture, designer, developer perspective, but the agents themselves have enough autonomy and awareness to engineer some of these segmentations and multiple model integrations themselves,
Right.
just by our policy, our English or natural language policy. So it's fun to see this evolution, but it's
Yes.
becoming an industry. It's becoming mature. It's becoming segmented. It's becoming intricate and complex for the uninitiated.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see companies learning too really quickly. Sometimes the hard lessons, right, where they had maybe laid off 40% of their workforce and said AI agents can do it, and then realizing, oh, not so fast. And then they bring them back to sort of public apology and all that. And I feel like there is a conversation around the cost realization that actually doesn't make the headlines. So yes, there's a capability gap for sure between AI and some of the agents. We get it, but no one is really talking out loud that actually there's a cost component that really surprised us, and we are going to change how we think about the workforce strategy going forward.
So that's so important right now. There's almost sort of two realities. One is that zero sum mentality where, yes, I
Mhm.
was expecting to just reduce my cost by replacing
Yeah.
humans, and that either hasn't happened because the quality is not there, and so I'm getting lower revenue, or yes, I figured out that I can match the quality with AI,
Mhm.
but it's just uh, swapping one for the other, there really isn't a benefit to doing that.
Yes.
The more interesting conversations actually, and not enough companies are having this yet, but the leaders will kind of create followers, is a positive sum mentality, where some companies are realizing, AI lets me fundamentally rethink my business, lets
Mm,
me rethink the tasks that my staff performs,
yes.
and the jobs are still there. The jobs are still, get this business function done, get this particular unit of value sold to a customer, get
Yeah.
the supply, processed efficiently. But the tasks change, and the
Yes.
most progressive companies are actually increasing their revenues, increasing their productivity, not laying off, but
Right.
realizing their tasks have changed, not the jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. And I've been running small focus groups with AI users, and one of the questions I really love asking them is, what are you able to do with AI that you absolutely could not before? Not how much faster are you doing something, but what could you not have done before at all? And the answers are fascinating. And I see the creativity and innovation when people talk to me about just really recreating a job that they now potentially like a lot better if they can change their workflows, and it's not just about doing the same things I was doing much faster
Yeah.
using AI.
Yeah, my favorite example of that, is dashboards. Like there's
Yep.
always information we want aggregated and synthesized and summarized that
Yes.
was in that giant in between zone of useful to me, but not
Uh-huh.
worth hiring a developer for,
Right.
explaining to them what I really want done, iterating over weeks or months, and then
Yes.
getting like months later an expensive dashboard that works. This can be
Yep.
done like in an hour now.
Right.
And so that when you compound that productivity benefit, that example is a big one. There's another kind of dark example to this as well, though, right? Which is what happened with Mythos a month ago when
Mm.
Anthropic released Project Glasswing. And we saw that this one particular class, this new class of super powerful model, is able to be creative and chain
Right.
together a bunch of attack sequences that were individually
Yeah.
defensible before, but collectively break not all software, but a lot of software.
Mhm.
Thousands of new vulnerabilities in the past month alone, and some very mature hardened software have been discovered. So that's just another example of, yes, you've got to reimagine both the positive, negative, the tool use and the weapon use of this technology, because it is possible and it will be exploited for benefit or for
Yes.
loss.
For good or for evil, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. And I felt that dashboard impact you described personally. I remember, and this is a while ago, but I wanted to try creating a dashboard from scratch. And this used to take my whole analytics team multiple sprints, right? And I need front end design, developers, I need designers, I need QA testers, the whole team. And now I was able to do it within, well, under an hour for sure.
Yeah,
And then Val, I was very skeptical. I was like, this is not going to work. It's not going to, function. The filters will break for sure. It can't export anything. No, nothing. It was one prompt and everything actually worked. It was quite beautiful too. So I think those moments of genuine awe, like sit back in your chair awe, is what a lot of innovation will come from, and at the same time a little bit scary for people who might be worried about what does this mean for my job.
yeah.
um, I'm curious if you have any encouraging words that you might say to someone who might see the power of AI but also worry about their future.
Yeah, I don't want to be too one-sided here, but it's been quite positive, on the WEKA front, where as chief AI officer, I had these two roles, inbound and outbound. From
Yep.
like, an outbound perspective, it was all about evangelizing the benefits of AI and certainly working on our product strategy and so forth. From an inbound perspective, a year ago, there's a lot of convincing people to just try these AI tools.
Yes.
And then, once developers finally came around, knowledge workers and so forth. What we're
Mm.
seeing today is, we have these amazing designers that are not out of work. They're now
Mhm.
helping everyone at the company be great designers. And they're
Yes.
busier than ever. Literally, we need to hire more because people are seeing the benefits, the productivity benefits, particularly of dashboards. And here's like the group benefit we're seeing is, as as we talked about earlier on, memory inventories, actual, DRAM, dynamic RAM memory, and high bandwidth memory inventories are in very short supply. Storage, flash drives, NVMe devices are in very short supply. Many of the dashboards we created for our own, procurement people and our own sort of service management people helped us make better decisions. And we now are in this weird, enviable position of not being, short on supply and actually having inventory of one of the hottest commodities in the industry today, which is, storage, and storage that works as memory. So there have been individual and company-wide benefits towards, realizing the tasks improve, right? And we're able to do a lot more and things we couldn't imagine. And the compounding benefits, we're seeing them in 3 to 6 months in our case.
Yeah. And I like to focus on thinking about AI in different levels, the individual, the team organization, and then also your constant focus on let's think about outcomes. Let's talk about outcomes, measure those instead of tokens and usage. And I think that's going to be really key for leaders who are considering the next chapter. I think the leaders who are going to win are not the ones with necessarily the cheapest AI or the most tokens somehow, but they are the ones who actually know what they want out of AI, and they're measuring the outcomes associated with that rather than tokens and then be surprised by a price. So yeah, definitely if you're building your strategy around people, make sure your AI cost assumptions are correct and not outdated. We talked so much about that today because that will get repriced, as Val said, when the subsidies come to an end. It's time to revisit, not time to panic. Val, thank you so much for today's conversation. Any last words that you want to leave with us?
Maybe just a fun sort of hidden narrative that's rising to the fore right now, which is what I call the revenge of middle management. So,
Ooh.
middle management is always like, the whipping boy, if you will. It's always something that is first to get cut, and leaders will proudly say we eliminated waste by that inefficient middle management layer. But then you take a look at where the productivity is coming from in AI. It's from agents. What do the best agents do? They organize in swarms. They actually literally form an org chart.
Yeah.
They take ambitious goals. They understand how to actually split and divide the goals and delegate subtasks to accomplish a goal, how to monitor and measure the subtasks for quality, for efficiency, how to synthesize that all back up into the final business outcome or requirement. That is a classic MBA middle management skill. And skills are like the hottest things to sort of train AI agents with. So I'm not just saying there's going to be this pendulum swing of everyone hiring a whole army of middle managers again, but middle managers have to realize that if you're on the job market all of a sudden, your skill is the hottest skill necessary for AI to work in business. Yeah. It's being able to program an agent, if you will. It's being able to set policies, goals, understand how to measure, how to delegate, and how to summarize. And so that's kind of one of my many hot takes, is that there will be a revenge of the middle managers, because it's middle management skills that make agents work, which makes AI give the ROI businesses expect.
I love that. It's so encouraging and such needed message today as people are feeling the anxiety everywhere. Thank you, Val, so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Can't wait. Always enjoy these.
Thanks for listening to Deep Geeks. A huge thank you to my guest today, Val Bercovici. If today's episode made you think differently about how AI gets built or powered, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Find Deep Geeks on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.